Hi, everybody. My name's Jim Foster, and we are here at the Iron Masters Mansion at Pine Grove Furnace State Park, which is just down the road a piece from the Appalachian Trail Museum, and it's induction day for our 2024 class of the Appalachian Trail Hall of Fame. It's hard to believe, but it's the 14th class. I think, Larry, this is 64 people that we've inducted, which is great. And we are having interviews today of some of the honorees. The first person is technically not a Hall of Fame inductee, I would say, yet, but he's an honoree because he is receiving Larry's Lifetime Achievement Award, and he is to my left. John Baudet, whose trail name is Bodacious. Welcome, Bodacious.
Thank you. Thanks, Larry.
So I know you live in, is it Flag Pond, Tennessee? Did I get that right? And is that where you grew up, or where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up in Texas.
Okay.
But my mother's from Harrisburg.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
When I started hiking the AT, I always sent her a picture of the building that's now the museum because she knew where I was. Because she came to Pine Grove Furnace to hike. So kind of have there's a house out in these woods around here somewhere. That was my grandfather's house, but I don't know where it is.
Well,
No, I moved to Tennessee after hiking a lot.
Well, there is a guy who is the and we're getting a bit off the subject, but there is a guy who's the head of the Friends of Pine Grove Furnace who basically knows all the history of this area. Sometime we should have you meet him, and I bet he could figure out, if you give him any kind of idea where that is, I bet he could figure that out. But back to the AT, his name is Andre Weltman, but you should get to know him, and I bet he might have an idea of where that is. So you hiked the AT twice, is that correct?
And then two more.
And then you did 4 times. Okay, so I sold you short. Okay, when did you hike the AT?
2001 first,
Mm-hmm.
then again in 03,
Mhm.
2010, and then I did a section hike during all
Mhm.
those years. So I did 4.
Okay, well, great, because I only did it once. What made you decide to hike the Appalachian Trail?
Actually, when I was a little kid, we were in a hiking club, and we went hiking I think once a month with a hiking club, and we had that National Geographic book about the AT,
Mhm.
which I still have, and it's got a copy of a newspaper article in it about acquiring the lands in the Cumberland Valley, because my mom was from here, So I looked at that book when I was a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
we went hiking a lot, and I looked at that book all the time,
Huh.
We used to go to the Smokies. My birthday's in the summer, and we would go to the Smokies for my birthday, and I remember being at Klingman's Dome and saying, well, what are those people doing with the packs? And they told me what that was, so,
Huh.
I knew since I was a kid, well, that would be pretty neat, so when I had a chance, I went and did it.
Cool.
myself.
I think I may have left out in the introduction why you are receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award, and that is, since we began the AT Hall of Fame in 2011, you have carved hiking sticks as the sort of trophies or Oscar or what have you for the inductees into the Hall of Fame. You've done them since the very beginning, and we're extremely grateful about that. By the way, for those of you who are watching this online, we have a display room on the first floor of the Iron Masters that has several of the hiking sticks, and you can see Bodacious's handiwork. How'd you get into carving?
Well, I mean, I hiked all my life, and when I started hiking, I realized driving up here, that was 60 years ago, everybody had a wooden walking stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of a bad kid. I would the group would keep going and I'd go over here looking for something, but I knew I could always find them because those walking sticks make a little dimple in the ground, you know, and I could follow the group and catch back up to them. But I carved walking sticks. I always had a nice walking stick, you know, and just over the years, you know, you start with just sitting around a campfire with a pocket knife, you know, making a nicer walking stick than the one you have, you know. It was always, it seemed like I was more likely to go take a hike if I had a nice walking stick to take, you know. So I was always making a nicer walking stick, you know, and I just, over the years, got more tools, more different ways to make them, and it's just became a hobby. Started making them and giving them to my friends, so that's
When you do trail maintenance with them on the way out, you always have to look up because you're looking for straight sourwood branches.
Yeah.
So you can make more sticks.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to ask, so thanks, Bob. You and I have talked about the process of selecting the wood and tell us what that is. And so kind of walk us through the process from selecting the walking stick to actually carving it, and what goes through that.
Well, I mean, probably a lot of y'all have carved a nice walking stick for yourself, and you probably find out,
Not like yours, though.
But I mean, you get a nice piece of wood and you maybe carve a little handle, make it nice, and a year or two later, you see that it's got a big crack going down the side. You know, most woods will dry out and crack. So I actually learned from one of our Hall of Famers, Horace Kephart. If you read Horace Kephart's Our Southern Highlanders, he talks about how all the mountain people in the Smokies at that time had a good walking cane. That's what they called them back then, a walking cane, and that they were made out of sourwood. Because sourwood will not split. You can actually carve it when it's green. It's still wet with sap, and as it dries out, it won't crack. If you get a piece of ash or something and you carve it away and make it real nice, and then you set it in a corner, over the next 6 months, it's going to dry out and crack all the pieces, so your work is ruined. So if you're gonna, you know, you wouldn't want to spend a whole lot of time carving a stick if it's some kind of wood that's just going to crack all apart. So the sourwood doesn't, you know, you can pretty much count on a sourwood won't crack all the pieces on you. So if you put a lot of time into carving an elaborate stick, you know it's going to last a while. So I learned that from Horace Kephart.
Okay. So you've selected your sourwood stick, and what's the next step then after that?
Well, people that make these sticks all have a unique collection of tools, but it's mostly, you start with a draw knife, which we use in trail maintenance a lot, taking the bark off of logs to use on the trail. Well, for a walking stick, you use a draw knife, and you have to go out in the woods and find the nice piece of wood to begin with. Sourwood is particularly good also because the woodsmen say you can't kill a sourwood. If a big tree falls and it knocks a sourwood down as it comes down, sourwood's an understory tree. Well, the sourwood won't die. It'll lay flat on the forest floor and it'll put up shoots and continue to grow. So those are little shoots growing with a big root system from a mature tree. So they grow really fast and straight. So that's what you're looking for, because it doesn't have many knots in it. But you take that home and use a draw knife and shave it down, get it down to the size you like. Then you start with different carving tools. I've got half a dozen draw knives and a whole box of everything from pocket knives to, even my dentist gave me some of his tools. I have some little tiny dentist tools that you can put wrinkles in a face on a stick with. a lot of them are called micro gouges. You know, you've seen people building cabins with a gouge. A chisel is flat, a gouge is curved. So you know, if you're cutting notches for a cabin, you can use a gouge and chop out a lot of wood. Well, I have what they call micro gouges for the lettering that are, I mean, they're tiny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, without glasses, I can't even tell which one I have in my hand because they're so small. So you just have to collect, a lot of tools.
Just to give you an example of his talent, he carved a three-dimensional lady slipper for his wife, a pink lady slipper, and a couple years later, he carved a three-dimensional yellow lady slipper with the beards. It's just, the man is an artist.
Well, for those of you who've never seen Bodacious's sticks, they are truly works of art. They are amazing.
That's his bear cub in
Yeah.
the children's section of the museum too.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good segue into my next question. What other things other than hiking sticks have you carved that we might like to know about?
I carved a lot of fish and birds for a lot of years. There's kind of a thing with trout fishermen that you don't have to kill the trout you just caught. You can release them, take a picture, take some measurements, and different artists will carve you a replica of that fish, so you can let your fish go. I saw some of those, so I like those. I made a lot of those. I made a lot of birds. I started doing chainsaw bears. They're getting a little hard to carve. That chainsaw's heavy. So I keep trying to get smaller. So I've been carving wildflowers, like Bob said. Lady slipper orchids are particularly neat to carve. Trying to do smaller things that aren't so hard on a person's bod.
He, in the west wing of the hostel, my hostel, he's carved an old man of the woods post. It's one of the pillars of that hostel.
And I think you've carved the old man of the woods in some of the hiking sticks too, haven't you? I believe so. I know I've seen that. Larry?
Yeah.
Any questions you have?
John, can you talk about how long it takes you to, wandering around the woods, how many miles to identify the wood, and then the time frame for curing the wood, and then how long it takes you to carve each one of the sticks?
Yeah, I mean, I have friends in the neighborhood, and they'll come over and they'll see those sticks, and I want you to carve me one. So they're always surprised because I tell them, okay, here's the deal. I got lots of work to do around here, so if you'll go do what I need to be doing, I'll sit on the porch. It'll take 8 hours.
Does that work?
Nobody's ever taken me up on it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that was going to
You
work.
mow grass, pull weeds in the vegetable garden. I'll be on the porch working on your walking stick, and they're not putting in 8 hours, but it's about 8 hours, and that's not including finding the wood in the woods. You can walk all day and only find one or two, or you can walk up to a sourwood that's been knocked down that has 3 perfect ones on one tree. You just never know. But as Bob attests, I'm never in the woods. I'm not looking for them. I bring them back from trail work. And
Anybody's walking out with them, they have to look too.
but I mean, it's probably an hour or 2 for every one you find in the woods. It takes a while to find them, to get nice straight ones.
Well, every year, Bodacious asked me how many people are getting in next year so that I know how many I have to go get in the woods, as he just described. So rather than having to send you an email, since you're right here, I'll tell you we're doing 4 next year.
Well, they can crack. So, the first year, I'll never forget the first year because Larry called me and said, "Oh, we're going to have this Hall of Fame, and could you make walking sticks?" And there was only maybe 6 weeks time till that was gonna happen, and I had to think about, could I make that many sticks in that short a time? And then, of course, the curmudgeon Earl Schaefer's stick cracked twice. I made his stick 3 times in like 6 weeks because it kept cracking.
I never heard that.
So
Interesting.
I already have some sticks that I've brought home for next year because they can crack, and arthritis is slowly ruining my hands too, so it takes me a long time to get them made. So I've already started. I need to know ahead of time just so I know.
Okay.
Didn't you get the wrong spelling for Jan? Pam Underwood's stick, or what are the sticks?
I think we had a one that I think I still have that. I have a stick
Yeah,
that I
think
couldn't
that's-
get
I
that
think
letter
that's
off
right.
of there without it being noticeable, so I still have that stick, and I use it to lay out the next batch, you know.
Now, he not only carves the 4 to the recipients, he also carves the one that's out here in the rack.
Yeah. Mhm.
The year stick for the, each year for the 4 recipients.
Yeah. And
Where did yours go, by the way? There's,
Larry took it.
yeah, that sounds like something.
the replacement for Bob's year is
Yeah.
in with the sticks for this year, so.
And I believe, maybe I shouldn't mention this on video because it's incriminating, but we used to have the sticks over at the museum, and then they came over here. And when they came over here, we discovered that one of the year's sticks was gone.
18.
18 is gone, the year that Bob got in. It had nothing to do with Bob. And maybe Bob took it, who knows? Maybe Bob may have taken it. But you know, we still are counting on a replacement stick for 2018 because we cannot find it. So
It's at the post of the shelter.
it could be. It could be.
We brought it with us this year. It wasn't Bob, he already had a stick, so he didn't take it.
There are other groups you've also done sticks for, ALDA and ATC as well?
Yeah, this was something that I've made sticks for different people just because they had done a lot for the trail or for conservation efforts in my area. You know, I know I had made Bob a stick before he got in the Hall of Fame. I remember making one for Larry and brought it to Alda before we had a museum. I remember giving one to Gene Espy, Lori Pottinger, different people that I knew that had done a lot of work that I appreciated. I would make them one. I've made them for different. I mean, we had a bunch of issues with the Rocky Fork area where I live, and the different people, mostly lawyers, that helped us straighten that out. I made them a walking stick.
Cool.
I make them sometimes for some of the nonprofits down there, and they'll auction them off at a fundraiser or something. So it was something I just did
Yeah.
for people I knew.
Respect
So-
it. That's the bottom line. You know, people that John respected.
Well, thank you, Bodacious.
Yeah, Bill had one too. Bill got one.
Yes, sir.
I just speaking to that, at Trail Days one year, the board lost one of its founding members this year, Noel Cavalcante, who died in July, I think it was. And one Trail Days a few years ago, Bodacious walked up to Noel and presented him with one of these, sticks that he did just for Noel. And Noel stood there, he's holding it. He couldn't believe it. It really, really meant a lot to Noel. He was basically speechless. He was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that you had done that for him. And he kept it in his little, not so little, office down in Florida. He was surrounded by trail memorabilia and so forth. And that stick was right there, front and center all the time. So it means so much to people when they get that Bodacious. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to add that.
Well, there's so many people, and Noah's a good example, that do so much for the trail, and the trail organizations can get no recognition.
Mhm.
And John's stick just recognize them, and that's super.
Well, I did not know Bodacious before he started carving sticks for us, and we don't see each other all that often, just occasions like this. And I have to say, you're one of the kindest and most gracious people that I know, and I'm really glad to have gotten to know you. And you have to stay in good health because we envision having this Hall of Fame for 100 years or more. So, and we're counting on you to be carving sticks for all of those. So.
That's nice of you. I'd like to carve them for a long time. If anybody has the secret cure to arthritis, let me know, because that's what I need.
Well, thank you very much. We're delighted to finally
Thanks, Jim.
get you here and interview you. We've been talking about this for a while. So the fellow who was piping up during the talk with Bodacious is Bob Peoples. And for any of you who've hiked any distance on the AT, particularly in the southern part of the trail, I said when we inducted Bob into the Hall of Fame in 2018 that the word living legend gets thrown around a lot, and probably unjustifiably, but Bob is truly a living legend on the Appalachian Trail. So welcome back to the museum and to the Iron Masters.
It's a pleasure.
And you're another one that we have never had a chance to interview, and so we're first gonna talk about you a little bit, and then we're gonna talk about the person that you're here representing. I'm going way out on a limb here and saying that you're not from Tennessee, based on having heard you talk. Where are you originally from, sir?
You don't think I'm from the northeast of Tennessee?
The extreme northeast, perhaps.
Tenement housing, streets of Boston.
Okay, yeah. Go Red Sox.
Go Red Sox. Go Bruins.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Penguins fan, so that now you're getting into dangerous territory. What did you do before you went down south and got involved with the Kincora Hostel?
I'm retired Air Force. Aircraft maintenance officer, 21 years. That's why I talked to Rush. And then after I retired, the kids graduated from college and married, the wife and I figured our responsibility was over. I was a maintainer for the Green Mountain Club. So I decided I'm getting out of the snow country. I'm going to the hills of Tennessee, and left my blade in Vermont, and that was a mistake when I moved down there, because there was a lot of snow in the mountains of Vermont and Tennessee. But we took a road trip in '94. It went from Davenport Gap to the Pennsylvania line. Every place the AT crossed pavement. And my only criteria was the land that I bought had to be within half a mile of the trailhead. And so I'm at Dennis Cove because it's 2/10 from the trailhead, and that was the closest. Being a hiker, and Larry I think will back me up, and Bill, if the hostel or the shelter's over half a mile away, my tent is going up. I'm not doing extra miles.
This is
So
true.
that was my criteria, so that's how I ended up where I am with Kincora. And Kincora means kinship of the heart, it's Celtic. And when you get together with hikers, we're all coming from the same place. We all have the same interest, we all have the same desires. That's why it's immediate friendship and family when you deal with hikers.
Well said. When did you start the Kincora Hostel?
I bought the land in '94 and started the hostel in '95. It took me a little over a year to build it. And so the first year was actually March of '97.
Okay.
And I didn't know if I could get 200 hikers because I was Vermont and didn't know how many hikers were on the Appalachian Trail, and wow.
I have my own story about staying at the Kincora Hostel in 2003 when I did my through hike. What Bob used to do, and I assume still does, is he takes a group of hikers into town to resupply, and we all get in the back of his truck, and I almost threw up in the back of Bob's truck going there, bouncing on the roads.
There's 11 switchbacks to
yeah.
go down the mountain.
Yeah, and so that's my. I have to say, you were very hospitable, but that's the biggest thing that I remember from staying at the King Cora Hostel was almost throwing up in the back of your truck.
That's not normally the complaint. Usually the complaint is you got it in the back of the truck and I didn't take you grocery shopping, I gave you a tool and you had trail maintenance to do.
I didn't do that. Maybe you knew that I already maintained a section
Bill
of the
can
AT.
answer that.
Maybe you knew that I already maintained a section of the AT when I hiked it. I don't know.
Okay,
It could
you
be.
escaped.
Yeah. So that's only a part of what you do for the trail. You're also incredibly well known as the recruiting people to do trail maintenance, and in particular the hardcore crew. Can you briefly describe what the hardcore crew is about?
Yeah. When you started hardcore, what the concept was, and I still feel the same way, it's awfully difficult to recruit. Get young people involved. We've got to get people behind us that'll pick up the burden. And consequently, started hardcore and already had 1 foot up because those people were hikers. They were hiking on the trail. Who made that for them? And consequently, how do you make it better for the next hiker? So hardcore was the Sunday and Monday after trail days, and it involved most years 100 hikers. 50 of the current year hikers, 50 returning hikers. So in 15 years, we picked them up Sunday morning at Damascus, have a day pack in the trucks, and they would have sandwiches, water, an apple in the day pack. That was your lunch. Then you'd work all day. You'd stay with me at Kincora or down at Bramer Castle that night. Then you'd work all day on Monday and would have a pasta dinner for you Monday night. Sunday night it was normally a pork barbecue and salad and stuff. And then the catch to it, when you signed up, where are you on the trail? And do you need a ride back to it? And so then when the returning hikers came in, where are you and where are you driving back to? And how many seats do you have in your vehicle? So somebody needs to come up to Pine Furnace. Rush is coming up 81. Put Rush together with the hiker, he gives them a ride up to 81 in Pine Furnace. And in 15 years, we never missed. So the final thing we did on Monday, about 2:30 in the afternoon, you yelled, anybody who wants to paint a blaze, follow one of the maintainers. So they all painted a blaze. And they painted the blaze where they worked. And now, are we overblazed in some areas? Yeah, who cares? What the bottom line is, they took possession of what they had done.
Yeah. I have to say, I've been involved with the Appalachian Trail for a while, and every official with every hiking club that maintains the AT that I've talked to has said, the biggest problem that we have is recruiting young people to join the trail, and I would imagine everybody in this room would say the same thing. And
one of the mistakes, Jim, that people they go to the universities and try and get the outing club, and the outing club's already overburdened.
Yeah.
What you need is the community service person. Every college has got 30 hours or more community service. Go to them and recruit with them, do service learning, the 10-hour requirement. It's a perfect place to get recruits.
That's good advice. Larry, any questions for you?
Yeah, so on that same theme, so ordinarily people have trouble recruiting you limit it to 100 slots. So I want to know more about your secrets of recruiting. I have a professional interest in this.
Well, as I say, that's the way I go after the college groups and stuff, is going after community
But for
service.
hardcore, you filled out,
I was filled up by Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
There was a line at 9 o'clock in the morning to sign up. Because it was a chance for them to pay back. That's what it was all about. They could learn, but they had two days of free food. They had transportation. They were back to the site. We didn't cause them any problem trying to return to the site. It was a total package. Now, were there mistakes? Yeah, there were. And one mistake, there was this guy, and he got in the truck at 8 o'clock in the morning at Damascus. And the rise to Pond Mountain, we took a shortcut and it was straight up. And he was sitting on a rock, and I went by and I said, "Are you okay? Do you have any water?" And he said, "There's 2 bottles in your day pack." "I already drank them." He was still drunk. He had no idea what he got in and went into the truck where he was going. He had a really bad 2 days.
Do you give up drinking?
Well, again, we returned him to Damascus.
Well,
But that's the thing with recruiting, is get the young people. We've
yeah.
got to get them. And the key to it is get the person that lives in the neighborhood. The hiker, ATC, recruit the through hiker. That's great, except they're going back to Oregon. You know, you've got to get the day hiker. That's what you really need.
yeah, that's a. So, we inducted you into the Hall of Fame in 2018, and as I said, this is our first opportunity to interview you. You were actually here to represent another person who we're inducting this year, who's from the Tennessee Eastman Hiking Club, Ray Hunt. I'll ask you a general question first. Just tell us about Ray Hunt.
Ray Hunt was really an interesting person and quiet person, very dedicated and a real doer. He maintained Roan Knob Shelter stewardship for, which we're now working on to replace the lower logs that are decaying. But Ray was the head of ATC in the 80s, 83 to 89, and when I knew him, he was land acquisition, Tennessee and North Carolina, and just really dedicated person, a doer. And one of his key interests when he was the head of ATC was publications. Get the word out. And how do you do that? And he did something, he was a maintainer, I'm a maintainer, John's a maintainer, Joe's a maintainer, Brandon's the Forest Service maintainer for our section, trails. He did something that I wish ATC would do again, and Rush, I think, will back me up in this. We tried to do it, and it didn't happen. He had a conference each year that all the clubs got together and told each other what they did best. It was a workshop for maintenance people that said, "Hey, what do you got that I could use?" And an example of stuff that we have, we put wire on the bridges so you don't slide off, and we have graffiti boards. So you don't write all over the shelter, you write on the graffiti board. When we came up here, one of the guys found Sherman-Williams had a anti-graffiti paint, a MAC paint that the Potomac Club used, so we put that on the shelters. You know, and everybody has specialties, but we don't know what they are. And Ray had put all that together.
Good.
And it was somewhere in the meantime, it's gone away.
Tell us some of the other important things that Ray did down in Tennessee.
Well, land acquisition was a big one, because that was when ATC was gaining all the land, but Ray was key on the 65-mile reload. They put their own mountains on the trail, and they built that 65 miles in 3 years.
I'm not sure if I should thank him for that, because Roan Mountain is a tough climb. But yeah,
You can
that's
thank
great.
Hardcore for putting all those switchbacks on Roan Mountain. They're the ones
Yeah.
that did that.
Yeah,
It used to be the Roan Grown, straight
Yeah.
up and straight down.
Anything else you can think of in Tennessee? I know he did a lot for ATC Trail Wide as well. I'm going to talk about some of that during the induction today.
No, I think from Myron Avery to Ray, well, Stan Murray in the middle of that, they were the ones that really pushed maintenance and land acquisition, which basically put the trail where it is now, and got away from the roadwalks, and that was key.
Good. In addition to his work in Tennessee, he served 3 terms as ATC chair and had a lot to do with getting legislation passed to fund land acquisition, as you said, for the corridor. That was a very important thing that he did trail-wide.
And he had another, yes it was, and he had another, in later years, side interest, and it was called the Exchange Place. It was a stagecoach station in Kingsport. And he had that all renovated and everything else, and that's now a historic structure. It's very dedicated.
Larry, any other questions about Ray?
And he was also the data book editor.
The first
1977,
one,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
On his typewriter. That's how he did the data book. And he did that for like 5-6 years. He updated it. And Joe has a copy for you that we'll present this afternoon of the second edition, 1981 edition of the data book.
Neat. Well, Bob, it is a pleasure to have you here again, and
Pleasure to be
and
here.
it's a pleasure to finally get a chance to interview you here. So you're welcome, and we look forward to the induction this afternoon.
I'm just following Larry's orders to throw out some stuff here.
Sure.
I do have one addendum to Bob here, about Bob. Everyone in hiking circles has heard about the Triple Crown, you know, the AT, PCT, and the Continental Divide. But I like to think of another Triple Crown that is even more exclusive. So exclusive, there are only 2 members in this club. They have received the ATC's Honorary Membership Award, the highest award the ATC gives to them up here. They've received they've been inducted into the AT Hall of Fame, and they've been made an honorary member of OLDA. And those, it's so exclusive there are only 2 members, and they're both sitting here today.
What a good idea for a picture. We'll have to get a picture of these 2 esteemed gentlemen. Well, thank you guys, and I'm going to ask you to find other chairs, and we're going to invite somebody else
Sounds good.
to come up.
Good job.
Is this your first time here at the museum?
It is.
You did? Okay.
It is, absolutely.
Tell us where you're from.
I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I originally grew up in the DC suburbs and
Okay.
live in Asheville now.
Okay.
Yep.
And you are Ed Ballard's son,
I
right?
am.
Okay.
And his grandson, my son, is here
Oh,
also, Tim.
well, heck, come on up here. Yeah,
All right.
welcome.
Thank you.
And your name is?
Tim.
Tim, okay. Well, great. It's great to have both of you. We talked a little before. Did you have any idea how important your father was to the Appalachian Trail?
I did not.
That's fascinating.
So my dad met my mom and got married in his 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I was born shortly after that.
Mhm.
And he didn't really talk about his life before that much.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until after he died and I was searching on the internet for stories about my dad and found the minutes of the conference where he proposed the buffer strip of land on each side of the trail.
Yeah.
And where it was accepted, adopted. And I found those minutes online on the internet, so I have
Mhm.
a copy on my computer at home. But I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this later, and Ed Ballard is not that well known, even among trail junkies like myself, I would say. But there are two important concepts that those of us who are involved with the AT know about that Ed Ballard is really responsible for. One of them is the corridor. He's basically the first person who came up with the idea of having a corridor, not just the AT itself, but a corridor to kind of protect the AT from development on either side. And the other important concept is the cooperative management system, because as most of you here know, the AT is on some land manager's land, but it's not the same land manager. It could be the Park Service here in Pennsylvania, it could be the Game Commission, it could be DCNR. In other places, it could be the Forest Service or some other state agency or something like that. He's the guy who came up with the idea of the cooperative management system. So these are two very important, critical things to the way the AT is structured. Did your dad take you out on the trail or take you for outings or anything like that?
Sort of.
Okay.
So I was a Boy Scout
Uh-huh.
in the DC suburbs, and my dad was the troop committee chairman.
Okay.
And it went on hikes with us. He was a little bit older than some of the other dads, so he didn't always go, but we did go on the AT as
Mhm.
one of the places we went camping. So he just was another dad out on a
Mhm.
camping trip. He never told me. He
Huh.
helped create it in the first
Uh-huh.
place. I also wanted to tell you a little bit about his background that
Sure.
I do know,
Sure.
that maybe would help people understand
Sure.
his interest and his way of thinking about the trail back there in the
Mhm.
beginning. He had a master's in landscape architecture from Harvard,
Mhm.
and in the 30s, he worked for the CCC, blazing bridle trails across New England. He
Mhm.
was avid cross-country skier.
Hmm.
He loved the outdoors. He
Mhm.
loved the outdoors. He loved plants. He loved. After he retired, he became very active in the Virginia Native Wildflower
Mhm.
Society, protecting wildflowers, preserving wildflowers. So he was very much an outdoors guy, very much someone who thought about
Mhm.
the interaction of plants and humans, and
Mm.
so the idea that he would propose a buffer strip of land makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Mhm.
Makes perfect sense.
Oh, which DC suburb?
Annandale, Virginia.
Okay.
Also, side note,
Sure.
completely irrelevant, but I was born in Harrisburg.
Oh, okay. So you have ties to Harrisburg, and Bodacious has ties to, it's the whole, I live in the Harrisburg suburbs, and so the whole world seems to revolve around Harrisburg, it seems. Yeah. Tim, were you old enough to know your grandfather at all, or?
A little bit. He died when I was probably 10.
12.
Okay, all right. And do you have any memories of particularly being in the outdoors with your grandfather, or?
We only saw them once or twice a year when we'd come up for
Okay.
holidays. So I didn't get to spend too much time outdoors with him. I feel like we didn't coordinate this. I don't know. I didn't know I'd be saying anything, but so I don't know if I'm getting ahead of anything you might say. But I think the main connection I have to him and to things related to the outdoors and the trail. Of course, growing up in Asheville, unrelated to him, we were always out hiking and in parts of the trail. But my actually, my college girlfriend, who was from Carlisle, so just all getting back to the area right here, her family introduced me. They always went up to Maine every summer, and they introduced me to Maine and to Mount Katahdin. And then after he died, I think I was a little bit older when I, probably in high school or college, Ed Ballard wrote a memoir that he never published, but he wrote a memoir that we have copies of in the family and read, and he wrote a lot about Maine because he had a very strong connection to Maine. Including when he was with the Park Service survey teams going out and surveying the area around Katahdin, and wrote a lot about that. And so they introduced me to Katahdin, which always made me go back and reread his sections that he'd written a lot about how important Maine and the trail area around Katahdin was to him. And so I've had the opportunity to go hike Katahdin several times since then, including this summer.
Yeah.
And whenever I do that, I always think back to how important that part of the trail was to him.
Yeah, great. What else should we know about your father or grandfather that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think an interesting story is how we happen to be here, which
Okay.
you know some of. But about a year ago, I happened to go on LinkedIn. I hardly ever go on LinkedIn. Happened to go on LinkedIn. And I guess it was a suggested connection or something. There was an Ed Ballard who posted that he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. I said, well, this is interesting. So I put a comment. I still have never met this guy, but I put a comment on there. My dad was named Ed Ballard, and he helped plan the Appalachian Trail in the beginning. That was it, nothing. And months later, Brian King
Okay.
contacted me through LinkedIn. And maybe you could explain who Brian King is exactly, because I might get it wrong, but he is the retired historian of the trail, is that correct?
He's played a few different roles with ATC, Appalachian Trail Conservancy. He was the publisher of his last position, and I think that he probably is the Appalachian Trail's leading historian, although one of the leading historians is to my right. You know, he's basically, his role is he's the historian of the Appalachian Trail. He's written a couple of books that are just must-reads if you want to know about the history of the Appalachian Trail.
And he was also the spokesman for the Appalachian Trail for decades.
Yes.
You know, the public affairs person for ATC.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so Brian, again, completely coincidentally, somehow, I don't even know, sees my comment on LinkedIn. I'm not sure how often he goes on LinkedIn, but I can't imagine it's often. And he saw my comment, and he contacted me, and he said, this year your dad is getting inducted into the Appalachian Trail Hall of Fame, and we had no idea how to contact a family member
Right.
until we saw your post.
I mean, that is fortuitous. Yeah.
And
Brian King is an expert at finding
Yeah,
where
he-
the bodies are buried.
well, he found where I was buried.
Yeah.
So he contacted me
Yeah.
on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and we
And
had a
he-
little bit of an email correspondence, and then we had a phone call.
Right.
And in the phone call, he told me that he actually talked to my dad, that in writing an article about the trail in the 70s, I think, or anyway, when my dad was still alive. No, it was the 90s. It was the 90s.
Yeah.
He called my dad and had a conversation with him about
Huh.
his experiences involved in the founding of the trail, and
neat.
shared some of that with me
Yeah.
that I had never heard before, and then connected me with you, and
Yeah.
Here we are. But
Yeah.
I just thought that was a pretty interesting set of
Right.
coincidences that had to happen for us to be here today.
And,
So
and
very
you
grateful.
still never had any contact with the other Ed Ballard?
No, he was just a conduit to Brian.
Yeah, well, in addition to his work with ATC, I believe he retired maybe 2 years ago. Brian has served on our Hall of Fame selection committee since the beginning, and he's an invaluable resource in terms of finding where the bodies are buried, and as Bill said, and he is the guy who knows stuff about trail pioneers, and we have meetings, at least one meeting a year, where we go over potential candidates, and Brian is just an invaluable resource in doing that, in working through
Well, I
that,
was
deciding.
really,
Yeah.
really pleased
Yeah.
that he found me and
Yeah.
contacted me and we could be
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
one more story for you.
Sure.
When in 2000, when my dad was finally knocked off his feet, he was active. He died when he was 94. He was an active guy, physically, mentally active,
Mhm.
right up until the end. He's in the hospital. He never gets out of the hospital, but of course, that point we didn't know that. And I'm there, and I asked him if he wanted me to read to him, bring a book, and
Mhm.
maybe from his apartment and read to him. And I thought he would pick some novel, some adventure,
Mhm.
Michael Connelly or something. And he said, "No, could you get the Appalachian Trail Reader, which had just been
Mhm.
published a few years before that with essays about the trail?" And I said, "Well, sure, yeah." And that's all he wanted to hear.
Huh.
Was he had me
Fascinating,
reading
fascinating.
essays from the Appalachian Trail to him as he lay in bed in the hospital. So
Yeah.
clearly, that was a very, very important part of his life that he didn't really talk about much, but
Yeah.
still, at 94,
Mhm.
that was the thing that he wanted to think about in his last days. So
Great.
I thought that was pretty powerful.
Well, I'm really so glad that we had the opportunity to connect, and that both of you were here to accept
I'm
his
glad you were
induction.
here to
Yeah.
connect
Yeah.
with.
You know, and it's not an unusual story where the family didn't appreciate, you know, what some of these pioneers did for the AT.
Mhm.
Myron Avery, you know, who we credit for putting the AT on the ground, his family, and Myron died relatively young, and his family was separated from the AT afterwards for the most part, and didn't fully appreciate how he was revered in the hiking community. So this story rings true, you know, over and over again.
Mhm. Yeah. So, thank you for coming. Yes, sir.
I have
Yes, sir.
a question. Which trail club did Ed belong to?
The Potomac Appalachian
Yeah,
Trail.
okay.
Okay.
I think you'll find, if you haven't already read it, Ed Garvey's first book, he talks about Ed. They were very close. Ed Garvey, one of the charter members of the Hall of Fame, and your dad were very tight. And I'm almost positive I
Oh,
remember at least hearing about Ed Ballard all the time from
Okay.
Ed Garvey. So-
I'll have to
Yeah.
look for that.
And Bob, how many times have people asked you about the Titanic?
Yeah. When I looked up Bob
Once or
Ballard-
twice, but the best
Yeah.
one was in the early days of the internet, early days of email years ago. I got an email from a school teacher in Columbia, South Carolina, asking me if her, I think it was third grade class, could have an email correspondence with me about the Titanic. And I said, yes, that would be great. I would enjoy having a conversation with them about the Titanic, except I thought she probably had the wrong Bob Ballard.
For those of you who don't know, maybe those of you who are watching this online, Bob Ballard is the name of the guy who discovered the Titanic about 40 years ago, I believe. And yeah, one of the things we do when we're trying to find family members and other people to accept for deceased people is we do an online search. And when I check for Ballard, of course, the Ballard that comes up
I bet it was hard to find me.
the other Bob Ballard, not you.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Yeah.
thanks to both of you for coming,
Thanks for
and we
having
look
us.
forward to visiting with you more this afternoon during the
Great.
induction.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Larry.
So we like to honor important trail people from the past, but we like even better honoring living trail people. And it tends to work out differently. Some years, 3 or 4, and sometimes even 4 or 4 are available to accept in person. This year, it's only 1, and I would like to ask our 4th and only living inductee to come forward. Hello, Ron.
Hi.
And I'm pleased to say that Ron's a friend of mine. And so, Ron, tell us where you live, first of all.
Well, I live in Poughkeepsie, New York, so
Okay.
it's about half an hour from the trail.
Okay. Did you grow up there? or-
No, I grew up in Florida. I was born in Tampa and brought up in St. Pete.
Okay.
And went to college in Massachusetts and then up to New England and then back to New York.
Cool. What was your career away from the trail? What?
Actually, at first 5 years out of college, I was teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I was technical teaching up in Vermont at a boys' boarding school, which also had I was also the advisor to the outing club, and this was a school that was based on the outing concept, where they did a winter trip of the entire school. But I took the ones who wanted to do even more, and we went up to, did some winter climbs up Mount Washington and Mount Mansfield. And then came down to New York, taught there for 3 years, and then went into educational computing
Okay.
from there. And for a few years, my wife and I were at the Marist College in the computer center. We sort of created it and worked there. And we've had our own computer consulting business ever since.
Good, good. You got involved with the AT in the 70s, is that right?
Correct?
Can you tell us how that came about?
There's actually a funny story attached to that. When I moved from Vermont down to New York, in Vermont I had been actively involved with Green Mountain Club.
Mm-hmm.
And our school club actually took care of one of the shelters up in Vermont. And so I tried to join the Green Mountain Club chapter in New York area. And they would not let somebody who was already in the Green Mountain Club in without a sponsor and a whole process. So I switched to AMC, Appalachian Mountain Club, and was doing some hikes with them, and then moved up to Poughkeepsie in '74. And I got a call out of the blue, I think best I can tell was about '76, from somebody who was saying, how would you like to join me on going out and taking care of my stretch of the Appalachian Trail, which at the time was the Pauling area. And he invited me and my wife, and we went with him hiking and doing minimal trail maintenance because it was almost all road walking back then. This was before the land acquisition process got serious. So at the end of the day, he says, well, the company that hired, I belong to is sending me back to Europe. How would you like to replace me? So I became an AT maintainer that way originally, and was an AMC maintainer for a couple of years. And that Pauling area at that time, well, Dutchess County, which encapsulates Pauling, has 30 miles of the AT, and at that point, 26 miles was road walking. So most of our trail maintenance there was basically walking along the roads, painting blazes on telephone poles.
And Pennsylvania was very similar to that
Yep.
in many sections of the
Yep.
AT, particularly in the Cumberland Valley where I maintained
Yep.
a section. It was a road walk for most of that. I believe you founded the Dutchess AT Management Committee, is that right?
Well, I was a little bit of arm twisting, but basically I was the original chair of the Dutchess Putnam. It was in the Dutchess Appalachian Trail Committee.
And then it became Dutchess Putnam.
And then we merged it in about 10 years later with Putnam County. So it was everything between the Hudson River and the Connecticut line after that. But actually, Bob Leone, who was he was, before they got the regions as well organized as they do now at ATC, he was the regional rep for at least that part of the Mid-Atlantic area. And he started a process that I got involved in right at the beginning, since I was already a maintainer in the area there, of having a series of meetings in each of the 4 towns in Dutchess County that the trail went through to try to create the original management plan for the Appalachian Trail in the area. So we'd meet in each of the towns, maybe with, one of the specialties of one of them would be fire suppression, and another one, be all sorts of different topics. So my wife and I both got involved in that stage, and then at the end of that, they decided the reasonable thing to do is to create a permanent Appalachian Trail Management Committee, and it was immediately suggested by one of the other people who was involved on that, Liz Levers, who is already inducted
Yeah,
into
right,
the
yeah.
thing. She sort of nominated me to be the original chair, and by acclamation, I became the chair of the Dutchess AT
That's the way it
Committee.
tends to work, I think.
Yep.
I know there have been several notable projects in that area. One that I know something about is the Nuclear Lake project. Can you talk about that?
Nuclear Lake was an unusual acquisition because normally the AT acquisition program is basically 120 acres per mile of trail, and the Park Service had the opportunity to get a larger parcel. So Nuclear Lake parcel was 1,100 acres for only about 3.5 miles of trail. So it was an unusual one. So and the history of it, why it's called Nuclear Lake, is it had been the site in the 70s of a nuclear processing fuels facility that actually made nuclear fuels for the nuclear submarines and things like that. And then they shut down operations, so there was a lot of concern whether the lake might be actually contaminated, things like that, by their processing. They actually had a plutonium facility that was right along the shore of the lake, and it had a waste storage building where everything was dumped into it, and then from there was a drain that went out into the lake. So there were a lot of concerns about whether or not it was a safe place for the trail, and originally our AT Management Committee recommended that the trail not go down to the lake, and we set up an upper route that stayed at least a half a mile from the lake going through the property. And then the Park Service, unlike many of the other Superfund sites, this was not technically a Superfund site, but they actually got it cleaned up. And that involved putting a containment facility over this building, scrabbling the floors because there had been some radioactive materials spilled on the floors and so on, and drained the lake, not entirely, but down about 6 feet, and then did a complete grid search of the lake and found nothing in the lake, even where the drain was, that would be anything higher than normal radioactive background. So after all that was done and everything was cleaned up, we moved the trail to come down to the lake. So, and the towns of Pauling and Beekman are the two towns that goes through. Never did we offered them the opportunity to put even more use of it, but they didn't do it. But the Park Service still has an on-site person that lives there. It was originally a family. It's now down to the mother, who's the only one left. She actually mows there's a dam on the lake. She mows the dam. She takes care. She's technically the dam master and things like that, and still is the primary protector of the lake and the property.
Larry?
Was there any thought given to changing the name?
Actually, there was, and and I was also on what we call the Nuclear Lake Management Committee, which was sort of a subcommittee of ours, or semi-independent. And one of the final decisions was don't change the name of the lake. So the history of it would be, well, better known. And there was an article, actually, when we had, during all this processing, there was an opposition to putting the Park Service. Park Service already bought the land, but they say we shouldn't buy used nuclear facilities and use it for parks. And so that was the one time I got mentioned in a New York Times article. I got interviewed on that because they were fighting. But by the end of this whole process, they disappeared. And at the final meeting of the Nuclear Management Committee, we made the recommendations like don't change the name, but we also recommended that the trail could come down to the lake.
Beyond your work in New York State, you've done a lot of work trail-wide. I know you've served for a long time on the Mid-Atlantic Regional Partnership Committee, who we refer to as the MARPC. Talk a little about that and some of the other trail-wide groups that you've been on.
Okay. Actually, for 6 years, I was the chair of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Partnership Committee. And actually, from, I forget what year it started, well, when we created this management structure in ATC in 2005 created the current definition of all the regions. I was on the group that got involved then, and I've been the New York, New Jersey representative to the Mid-Atlantic RPC ever since. Still am. I also now chair the organization of New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. Has 3 AT committees, which now Dutchess Putnam, which is New York east of the river, there's Orange Rockland, New York west of the river, and New Jersey. And I have a coordinating committee where I coordinate the 3 committees that, so we act sort of in unison when we go to ATC meetings and things like that as well. I've also been one of the few volunteers on the committee of ATC. It's actually larger than ATC. It's ATC and the Park Service actually have the whole group that does the talking about extending the AT concept beyond the corridor and all the lands near it there. So I've been, I guess they've had 5 or 6 annual meetings now, and I'm one of the few volunteers. Most of it have been members of some of the different organizations that actually are conservation organizations.
So after a half a century of involvement as an AT volunteer, what are some of your, strongest memories and impressions, of all those years of service?
One of the biggest was after, and Liz Levers was a good starter on this of getting the actual process going in 79 through 82, say, of getting the AT corridor put together. One of the biggest memories was being pretty much in charge, and we had a strong management committee, so I didn't do, by any sense, all of this myself. We had a lot of people who stayed around many years and put together all the trips to actually build the new AT. I said we had 26 miles on the road. Now it's about 100 yards on the roads in that space. So the process of building the AT, we did it in sections, and we'd have an opening for that, and it might be from one major road crossing to another. And that was one of the most interesting things, because we would have ceremonies to open a section of a trail and maybe have 150 people show up for it, things like that. It was a lot of work. A lot of people did a lot of good work. The other thing we did is in Pauling, the trail is now on a permanently protected route with approximately 1,600 feet of continuous boardwalk. Working with the crew that put the boardwalk together, that involved ATC Mid-Atlantic crews as well as all our local volunteers. And over the course of a few weeks, we actually moved all that from where the railroad train crosses the AT. For people who may not realize it, that the New York Metro North Railroad actually has an AT train station right where you can go from Grand Central to the AT in one continuous train strip, and then get off and hike the AT from there, north or south. And a lot of people would get off there and then hike it back down towards the Bear Mountain area and then take another one of the Metro North trains back to New York City.
How did the trail go from a surface crossing of the Taconic to under the Taconic?
That was something where we got directly involved with the New York Department of Transportation on that. That used to be one of the most dangerous crossings of the AT. The Taconic Parkway was built really as a parkway, which meant it was really designed for 40-mile-an-hour speed limits. And now everybody uses it at 65 to 85 miles an hour. And then it was 2 lanes, a median, just a narrow median, no strip or anything, just a separator, and then 2 more lanes. And people, as we jokingly said, if you tried to cross the trail there, cross there, your body would be southbound and your pack would be northbound. So we did some land trades where we're involved with ATC and the Park Service, where there were some land trades between the Department of Transportation and ATC and the Park Service, so that they could actually build up the property, and actually raised some of the land there about 40 feet to put the overpass over the, so that the Taconic Parkway would go over the trail, and it actually takes the underpass now and is no longer has that much danger of crossing the Taconic Parkway.
Well, the oldest tenured AT volunteer that I know of, at least, is Dave Field, who I think has been volunteering on the AT since he was 17 years old, and I believe he's close to...
1954.
Yeah, so you don't quite, you haven't yet reached him, but being involved with the AT for over 50 years is quite a feat. And we are thrilled to have you today, and we look forward to honoring you further
Thank
at
you.
the induction. So thank you very much to those of you who are here in this room, and to those of you watching online. Thanks to you too. For those of you who are here, there are locations to get something to eat here, and there are innumerable locations in Carlisle, and we look forward to seeing all of you at 1 o'clock for the induction.
And before we end, I'd just like to point out our photographer, Ed Riggs, has a hiking column in the Gettysburg paper.
He does.
And in my view, the best hiking column in the country today.
Yeah, he's... Okay. So, thank you very much.